stage. Dave Moore is Executive Vice President of Corporate Development. You might recognize Dave. Dave worked in NNI, our US operations, as head of commercial some years back, left to explore a career in biotech and private equity, but came back a year and a half ago to lead our corporate strategy and business development activities. So over to you, Dave.
Thank you, Lars. Thank you. Thank you. Such a pleasure to be back at Capital Markets Day, and really happy to kick things off and spend some time with you to talk about our corporate strategy. As Lars mentioned earlier, our purpose is the center point of our corporate strategy. It's anchored there. And we're here to defeat serious chronic diseases. It's what drives us. For people like Isabella, who we just spoke to this morning, we have 4 focused areas that comprise our corporate strategy. Diabetes and obesity are the #1 priority. Diabetes is our heritage. It's where it all started. And we will continue to be the leaders in diabetes into the future. That includes both type 1 and type 2 diabetes. We are also the leaders in obesity. We have been since the beginning. That is not going to change. We will strengthen our leadership position in obesity, and we will shape the future obesity market. In our rare disease franchise, we also have a position of strength. We've been in these businesses since the 1970s and 1980s, and we will use that position of strength, that strong history, to expand to new areas as well. As Lars mentioned, cardiovascular disease is now a new focused therapy area. And we've put extensive work into building a competitive pipeline in cardiovascular disease. It's an adjacency. It aligns well with our history in diabetes and obesity. And we're also working on some emerging therapy areas, such as chronic kidney disease and liver disease. So when we execute on this strategy, it goes right back to our purpose. We're now at a point where we're adding millions more patients every year that we're serving, like Isabel. And that is what will continue to drive us into the future. One thing that has served us well over our long history is a clear and focused strategy. And that will continue. That's the way we operate. And we wanted to share with you some of the considerations, some of the choices that we make when we think about our focus areas and we think about our strategy into the future. So on the left, what you see here is the external view. The things that we take into account when we're thinking about moving into an area or strengthening our position. We have to understand, what's that market look like? Where's the real potential, the value that exists? Is it growing? Are we able to participate in that growth? And can we lead? Secondly, is there a real need? Is there a place in therapy that we can own differentially to compete? Once again, our focus is to be a leader if we go into an area. And then lastly, what's the level of risk? What's the level of innovation that's required? We are an innovation-based company. If an area doesn't require new innovation, it doesn't really line up with who we are and our history. And then what we do is we take those external views and we marry them up with our company. As you see, we don't go into areas that don't work for Novo Nordisk. Where's our position of strength? Do we have strengths that we can leverage to compete in that marketplace? Our internal capabilities, what's our R&D capability in that area? Can we supply the market? And is our commercial execution at a place that we can leverage that strength as well? So what happens when we work through these considerations is we have a good understanding of where we will play and how we will win in the future. And we believe strongly that strategy is about making choice. We can't be everything to everyone. We must prioritize. So this is what it looks like when we prioritize even within our focused areas. As we mentioned, diabetes and obesity, priority number 1. And will remain that way for some time. And we wanted to give you some words to characterize what does that mean to be the top priority here. Well, from an investment standpoint, it means that's our key investment area. It means the most time, energy, resource will go into those therapy areas. It also means if you think about the R&D pipeline, it's broad, it's also deep, so that we understand the future segments, we're shaping that, and where these diseases are going into the future. The second priority is now cardiovascular disease and rare blood disease. And what that looks like is we want to go after multiple targets in the key segments within those therapy areas. The investment focus is we're building competitive pipelines for the future. So those future launches take these therapy areas to the next level. The third priority is the emerging therapy areas, MASH and chronic kidney disease, as well as rare endocrine disease. So this is a little bit more targeted, a little bit more focused. We're looking for those synergies that exist within the organization, those adjacencies, when we're building pipelines for these therapy areas. And lastly, when we do work in indications like Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's, these are not focused therapy areas for us, but they're still important diseases with high unmet need. And that is a targeted investment where we're really looking for opportunities. It's trigger-based, based on how those programs progress. So when we take our focused areas, and now we think about it in terms of an R&D pipeline, we then break that down into near-term and long-term focus. And if you think about near-term, it's really about executing on the strategy. That's our focus, right? So if you take each one, in diabetes, what's our near-term focus? Maximize CagriSema and maximize insulin icodec. That is near-term, right in front of us. In obesity, it's also about maximizing CagriSema. We really like it when one of our programs can serve more than one therapy area. In cardiovascular disease, it's about maximizing ziltivekimab, and in rare blood disorders, it's Mymate. Those are very clear. The long-term focus on the bottom is about building those pipelines for the future. And here is where that work really matters. Where's this therapy area going? How do we see it evolving? What's the competitive landscape? Let's take obesity as an example. What will it take for us to be the leader into the future? What's the innovation height that we're going to need to bring? What do those future market segments look like? That's what we think about in terms of the long-term focus. And I also wanted to spend a couple of minutes to share some insights and thoughts around external innovation. As you've seen over the last couple of years, our BD, M&A activities have increased, and you should expect that to continue. And it will continue in a focused way, just like we've been talking about. We're looking for research and development stage assets that we can add to the pipeline where our internal R&D capabilities can add value. That's what makes sense to us. We have dedicated search and evaluation teams for each one of these therapy areas that are out there looking for that opportunity that we can add to the pipeline that complements our internal R&D capabilities. We have a pretty high bar internally. We're looking for things that are better, that are in modes of action that are different than we might be working on. In addition, we look for technology platforms that we can leverage across these TAs, and that work will continue into the future. So now we've given you an idea of where we focus, the choices that we make, and then also how we're building for the long-term growth. I'd like to turn it back over to Lars.
Thank you, Dave. And in my opening, I mentioned that I would just get a bit back to what it means to be a sustainable company. So before we get into R&D and manufacturing capacity, just allow me a few slides to address this. So I mentioned that we're committed to being a sustainable company. We are very pleased with our ownership structure. We have the ultra-long perspective from the foundation being a safe anchor for the company. And we have, in addition to that, the day-to-day, say, discipline that the capital market push us on. I think that's a very, very attractive ownership structure. Our shareholders have, in our articles of association, adopted the triple bottom line principle. So we have to be a socially responsible company, we need to be an environmentally responsible company, and obviously a financial responsible company. We'll get into the finances later on today, so allow me just a few comments on how we look at the social and environmental responsibility, starting with the environmental impact. We have committed to be, say, a net zero company by 2045. We're progressing on that. We have a commitment to be also zero in our emissions from our own operations and transport by 2030. Short term, we are building a lot and we're growing a lot, so that has an impact, but doesn't change our long-term commitment to this agenda. We are proud about how we have taken initiative to actually deal with the waste that comes from use of our devices. We have the REMIT program, where we're now live in 4 countries, where we take back plastic devices for recycling. And since this is a bigger challenge than just one company, we've also invited our competitors and peers in, and we're glad to see that more companies have joined this effort. We're now increasingly focusing on biodiversity. I personally feel this is a bigger challenge for society than CO2 emissions, which perhaps can be solved by innovation. So it's important for a company like Novo Nordisk to focus on what is our biodiversity impact and how do we mitigate that. From a social responsibility point of view, obviously our largest contribution is the innovation we provide to patients. But when you look at access and the fact that we treat now a bit more than 40 million patients, it's good to understand that close to 7 million of those are actually benefiting from some kind of access program from Novo Nordisk. There's a lot of focus on the African continent and access to medicines. So I'm also pleased that we have formed a partnership with Aspen Pharmaceuticals to bring local filling of insulin vials to Africa, something that can be scaled and reach many patients in the coming few years. And we're also tracking and helping more than 50,000 children living with type 1 diabetes in getting access to free insulin. And those children would have a quite difficult life unless we had provided that. Prevention is also on the agenda. You can say dealing with obesity is actually preventing type 2 diabetes. But we're also looking at, say, the broader societal aspects. We have now 47 cities involved in our Cities Changing Diabetes program to, drive health benefits in these big cities. We have renewed our partnership with UNICEF, and we have established an obesity transformational prevention unit last year. So these are some of the elements of our social commitment. I'd like to finish up on compliance and ethics. I know it's something that's been a keen focus area for many of our investors. So just share with you that when we look at the Novo Nordisk way, a key element is actually compliance. So we guide all our employees to follow 10 essentials. One of them is never to compromise on quality and business ethics. It's involved in our code of conduct. It's involved in all the training efforts we do. We do audits, we do training and risk management of all of these aspects. And of course, when you approach a new disease area like obesity with some inherent dilemmas, this becomes even more important. So we have taken initiative to both communicate to healthcare practitioners in what is the correct use of our medicines according to label. We have done a lot of work in making sure that our employees are keenly aware of how do we interact with HCPs, how do we interact with stakeholders, even when we bring a patient on stage here, and what can we talk to as a company. We have beefed up resources, so as we increasingly roll out our obesity portfolio in various countries, there'll be dedicated people to secure that we stick to compliance. So as a CEO, I just wanted to make you hear from me that I'm very comfortable in the program we have. It does mean that there'll not be mistakes from time to time, but I feel we have a really, really strong compliance program. So with that, we'll close